Solid Waste Committee meeting. I hear an echo. But we'll start off with our land acknowledgement. So the TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nation communities across our vast regional district and today are located on the Tecumseh-Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnerships that we have with Tecumseh-Secwepemc and respect the territory and the land on which we gather today. Okay, so I'm looking for someone to move the minutes from our last meeting. Okay. Do I need to repeat who's moved and second them, or we're good? You guys will capture that. They'll capture it? Okay. I believe we're supposed to do the elections of the chair and the vice chair at this time. So we'll call for nominations for the chair.
Oh, we could, hold on.
Director Onslow,
One moment, sorry.
I can do it for you if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, okay, good, thank you.
All right.
You don't want me to
Thanks.
wing it?
Okay, so as set out in the Local Government Act and the Board of Directors Procedure Bylaw, we will now carry out the election of chair for the Regional Solid Waste Management Committee. Nominations will be called 3 times. As candidates are nominated, they will be asked if they consent to the nomination. Nominations will then be closed. If there is only one consenting candidate, that candidate will be acclaimed as chair. If there are 2 or more consenting candidates, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to say a few words if they wish before ballots are distributed. I will now call for nominations for the position of chair. First call for nominations for the office of chair.
Doug, go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Director Bill Sarai.
Director Sarai, do you consent?
I consent.
Second call for nominations for the office of chair. And third call for nominations of the office of chair. Okay, there being no further nominations, Director Sarai is chair of the Regional Solid Waste Management Committee. Congratulations. Okay, so now we'll call for the office of vice chair.
I nominate Director Grenier.
Director Grenier, do you consent? Okay, second call for nominations for the office of vice chair. And third call for nominations for the office of vice chair. Okay, Director Grenier is acclaimed vice chair of the Regional Solid Waste Management Committee. Congratulations.
We don't have to start the meeting all over again. Right? We did that addition. Yeah. On behalf of Vice Chair Grenier and Director Grenier and myself, thank you very much for the support and the encouragement, and looking forward for this moving forward this year and dealing with solid waste in the TNRD region. And with that, we're on item number 4, additions or deletions from the agenda. Sorry, seeing none, we will go to the minutes. Moved by Director Smith, second by Director Houghton. All in favor? As moved, as carried. And now we are at item number 6, Regional Solid Waste Management Plan 5-year review. And we will be hearing from Manager Melu.
Thank you, Chair. This will be a presentation by the consultant that we secured to do the 5-year effectiveness review, Stan Tech Environmental. We have Veronica Bartlett online, so I'll pass it over to Veronica.
Hello, can you hear me okay over there? Just want to double check that everyone can hear me. I'm unmuted at my end. I can try to call in again.
Veronica, can you hear us on your end?
I can hear you. Can you hear
It's
me?
you talking. We can't hear you in the boardroom. It sounds like people can hear you online or just working out the technical
Okay.
difficulties here. I think it's on our end, not yours.
Okay.
Veronica, can you hear us now? Do another test, please.
Yep.
There
Can you
we
hear
go.
me now? Oh, great.
Okay. Yes, we can hear you now.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. I am just going to share my screen and bring up the presentation. And slideshow from the beginning. And just want to double check you can still hear me.
Yes, all good.
Great. Okay. And you see my first slide here.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I will today have a brief presentation when I will cover just introduction of myself, what the scope of this effectiveness review, what we did, just a really quick recap of when we refer to your solid waste management system, what we refer to, some of the key highlights from our review, and then next steps. My name is Veronica Bartlett. I'm with Stantec. The company that I joined actually when I moved to Canada 12 years ago was Morrison Hershfield, and we got acquired by Stantec just over a year ago. I grew up in Sweden, lived in New Zealand for 10 years, and that makes me have this really strange accent. So if you're wondering, that's what it is. And I've been in the environmental consulting industry for about 17 years. And in particular, I've been focusing on long-range solid waste planning and supported about 8 different regional districts in BC on solid waste management plans, and with the TNRD here with effectiveness review of your plan. So this in TNRD's solid waste management plan from 2018, you had a commitment in there to undertake this effectiveness review. And that is also something that the ministry are asking regional district to put in, and it follows their 2016 guide to solid waste management planning. So this is a kind of review that provides like a bit of an opportunity to look at achievements that achievements to date. Now, when you sort of midway through your plan, solid waste management plan is for a 10-year period. and you're already 5 years into it. So what have you achieved to date? What are the key challenges that you have come across so far? And it's really there to maximize the benefit and the focus of your last 5 years of your plan implementation. So with your regional district, we provided a bit more context in the report, but I think you all know your regional district well. You of course have a growing population, and it's just growing slightly above the BC average. And I think with particular growth in Kamloops in terms of multifamily housing, and so you're seeing a more growing urban and aging population that continues to put pressure on your solid waste management services. So when we're talking about this solid waste management system, you have a vast network of different facilities, and TNRD owns some of them. You have 2 regional landfills. You have in the report, I just wanted to point out that we have realized that it's at 15 transfer station, and we forgot the Savona transfer station. So that's going to be added in when we finalize the report. So these are, and I'm not going to read them all, but they're a mix of disposal and diversion facilities. So in terms of some of the key highlights from the review, just wanted to show you like how so when we measure performance, we often look at the per capita disposal. So how much goes, and this is based on scale data, how much of is being landfilled every year based on a per capita. And as a target in your 2018 plan, you had 500 kilograms per year by 2028. So that was an ambitious target. It's been trending somewhat an increase throughout the last, since back in 2015. And we also, with this orange line, provided the provincial average that sort of is somewhat a little bit more flatter in structure. But I just wanted to also emphasize that the TNRD, although you're sort of above the BC average in terms of disposal rate per capita, you're quite similar still to some of the other neighboring regional districts. You have Columbia Shuswap there at the bottom. The Central Okanagan is quite close to in performance with Thompson-Nicola. So I think in terms of like the interior regional districts, you're quite very similar in performance there. And this next slide is around, actually provides the diversion rate based on the TNRD and the City of Kamloops data together, and the trend showing 2020 to 2023. And the diversion rate has gone down and then up again. But overall, they have decreased. On the slightly more positive note, I think Recycle BC, the stewardship agency for packaging, have reported on a recovery rate in the region of 42.5 kilograms per serviced capita as they measure their success in. And that is region specific, and that is very much the same as the BC average. So that is good performance in terms of the capturing the Recycle BC materials. And then it's important to look at what actually ends up still going to landfill and what can be diverted from this waste. And most recently, there was a waste composition study done in 2024 that showed that there's still a lot of potential to improve. 75% of the waste can still be diverted through either composting or recycling. And this pie chart here shows, for example, some of the key items that you can focus on are like compostable organic waste, for example, 36%, and paper and paper products, so packaging, 17%, and plastics here in blue, 14%. So those are big chunks there of big opportunities to improve there. And in terms of the TNRD's landfills, the report goes into just a status update of those and just making sure that reflect that you've done some conformance reviews of your you operate 2 landfills in the region, and both are natural attenuation landfills, so they're not engineered and lined. So both have completed these conformance reviews, and you have had updates to your design and operations plan, the DOCP, and they are have quite a lot of remaining lifespans, so 70 years for the Lower Nicola and Heffley Creek at 90 years. And the report also emphasizes the TNRD's commitment to doing your bit and being proactive about fighting climate change. So in terms of greenhouse gas mitigation and reduction measures when it comes to waste management, the TNRD has installed methane oxidation beds at 4 landfills, and that's really to help reduce landfill methane emissions. And you also provide annual greenhouse gas emission reporting every year. So the solid waste services of the regional district, they are funded through mainly 2 different pots of money. So user fee, user pay system. So these are tipping fees that brings in about 30% of the revenue, and then the rest tax requisition is 70%. There's some minor revenue sources from like extended producer responsibility, such as like Recycle BC, or also agreements with First Nations communities. User pays then refers to tipping fee revenue. So these are disposal fees that are paid by all customers when they deliver waste to your solid waste facilities. And in terms of taxation, that is all the electoral areas and member municipalities, and this with the exception of City of Kamloops, they have their own service. They are being taxed for this regional service. So just making a note, and we will expand on it a little bit later on about some of the challenges that you've seen around like operating costs going up and some variability with tipping fee revenue, and that just makes it a bit more challenging to really work out the finances and the cost versus the revenues. So then I'm getting into first emphasizing some of the strengths and some of the key achievements of your plan, and then I'll highlight some of the sort of challenges that we have noted in our report as well. So in general, I think the TNRD has progressed really well with implementing your 2018 plan, and some of these are just some of the key achievements really. And the City of Kamloops, and with support of the TNRD, launched the citywide residential curbside organics collection in Kamloops. So I think that's has been going quite well. Another success is the household hazardous waste roundup, or like now you have a permanent facility that can accept household hazardous waste materials from residents, and it's being very it's over expectations. It's been very well used, which is great, and all of these materials are not ending up in landfill, which is important, or even being dumped down the toilet or something. TNRD also has developed this construction and demolition C&D toolkit and a strategy there, and is now getting into exploring mandatory recycling of C&D materials and engaging with the C&D sector there. And with illegal dumping, that the regional district has done really well with developing this monitoring program that's been really effective in reacting and being proactive in terms of illegal dumping cleanups and targeting those. And lastly, TNRD has been very active in advocating for EPR and also providing feedback whenever there's been opportunities So the province has asked for feedback on like future materials to include as part of EPR, and the TNRD has been very active through the BC Product Stewardship Council. And then the next two slides are getting into some of the challenges that we've seen here, with three sort of main challenges on this slide, and they all sort of relate a bit to each other, and then another three on the next slide. So these are some of the challenges, and certainly where there are areas to improve. And as I said, the disposal rates have been going up. And that is likely attributed to the influx of materials from, well, you have population growing, but you also have seen some recent natural disasters, such as like fires, and you have flooding, and you also have had some large-scale projects in your region with the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So those have really been putting pressure on some of your facilities, and that is showing up in the data as well. So it's often quite hard to tell whether waste disposal habits of residents and businesses, how they are sort of showing up in the data. But we are seeing certainly the need there to manage the sort of unpredictable surges in waste materials. So as I said, like that's coming from the natural disasters and some of these like major projects, for example. And it all links into financials as well, that when the TNRD staff are trying to work out like what taxation levels to set for coming years, they look back at trends. So it's really important to have good data on where different waste volumes are coming from, so that you can then try to see trends and understand like how much are we likely to get in terms of waste over the scales next year, what is likely to come in as tipping fees versus how much do we need to fill in terms of taxation. So, and it's quite the balance there. You don't want to be seen as overcharging. And in terms of these sort of larger projects, there's certainly something that the TNRD can look at their requirements there for waste acceptance from larger projects to be a bit more proactive about what's coming in. So there's certainly, in terms of financials, there's been this, and I mentioned the higher operating costs and some variability in terms of tipping fees coming in. So there's certainly, and the report goes into some of the key challenges where like operating costs have gone up. And the household hazardous waste facility has been a real success, but because it has been so well used, it's actually been causing a lot more, bringing more costs, because more materials coming in than was anticipated. Also, hauling contracts have gone up, and I think we seem to be seeing increased costs everywhere now. But and then a last one that I wanted to comment on or highlight is the this waiving of fees for taking tires on rims and mattresses at regional facilities, and that's also increasing costs. Mattresses has been earmarked as a future EPR program, and we're very hopeful that that will become under EPR, because then you will not see it as a cost to the regional district in the same way that you are now. And hopefully that will be actually a cost that would be carried by the producers. Then the last sort of challenges or opportunities to improve I wanted to highlight are relating to organics diversion. So you've seen in your region, you had a recent construction of this composting facility at your and now I need to get my pronunciation right. Swixtum, the Swixtum engineered waste management facility that is owned by the local First Nation near Kamloops, and also Grasslands Organics. And I think this facility can work as a real catalyst here for additional organics diversion, where you actually have a local facility, and now there's a real opportunity for the TNRD and the city to support this facility through encouraging the ICI, so industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, to divert organics as well. I think that we've had a lot of focus on the residential sector, but the ICI sector also needs to follow, and that could be through like landfill bans and also supporting other municipalities to collect organics. And in terms of recycling, there's been a lot of focus on like what residents can do, but I think that there should be increasing focus on the non-residential sort of recycling and diversion opportunities here. And the report, we highlight a few little challenges there about like there's some lack of recycling options for packaging materials in terms of that come from commercial sources. And hopefully, once again, the ministry of the province have been talking for some time about potentially including ICI as part of like whether it's Recycle BC or whether, there will be an EPR program for the ICI materials as well, because Recycle BC only deals with residential packaging. But that's yet to see. I don't think that they haven't given any time frame for this yet. There's also, in terms of non-residential recycling and diversion, C&D, construction and demolition waste, of course, is a really important piece here, and actually having those local options. So that is something that is certainly on the TNRD's or staff's radar as they start talking about like a mandatory recycling of C&D waste, for example. There has to be options there. And I think with agricultural plastics recycling, that is something I believe that is very, it's soon to come. There's a pilot that is in the works, and hopefully that will come off the ground in the next couple of years, I'm hoping. And the last issue here is around just private landfills. So there are currently 3 private landfills operating in the region. And they were identified in the 2018 Solid Waste Management Plan. So in 2024, the TNRD were requested to approve and allow a new private landfill by the Bonaparte First Nation in Cache Creek. I think so. The regional district did a review of like existing disposal options and capacity in the region, and I think with that declined it and said that that the region's sort of residents and businesses and First Nations are already well served by existing options in place. So and I think probably with being located in a very dry environment in the interior, where it seems to be that you may see more of these kind of requests in the future. So I think that for the next solid waste management plan, I think it will be good to really revisit and just make sure that you're happy with the approach of approving these sort of these new facilities. And I think that any private facilities, I mean, it is important that they share the same solid waste management goals as the TNRD and the City of Kamloops, for example, and other municipalities, and that they also have similar diversion requirements, so that it really provides that level playing field. And then I'm on to some of the key recommendations is really about, so you progress really well on your actions, and I think you have some important years left to implement the rest of the plan. And it's really important there to keep on, about education, and promotion and education is really essential to behavior change. And I think it's also key to, of course, address, especially if financial uncertainties seem to be coming up most days now, but addressing and exploring really how your solid waste management system can be run more efficiently, for example, if there's any opportunities to recover more costs in any ways. Because, yeah, taxation levels, certainly we understand that they can't just keep on growing to cover like increased costs. And also, there's also tricky bits with like, you don't want to go too high with the tipping fee, because then you also risking that people take their waste somewhere else and then you're losing out on that revenue. In terms of efficiency, I think you have a regional network of facilities that is very extensive. And I think there's an opportunity to look at whether there's an opportunity to reduce the service level, and like, are there too many facilities in some locations, or and that's certainly to when you look at the system together with the private facilities. So I think seeing private facilities more as they can complement the regional district, I think it's important, rather than just competing it. And I think that also tracking this tracking waste and understanding like the sort of surges and waste materials, that's really key as well. And I think in our report we emphasize the need for like an emergency debris waste management plan, so that you're already proactively thinking about for the next flood or the next, unfortunately, the reality, but we need to plan for these natural disasters and think about the implication on your facilities, and which ones will be key, play a key part in those. So then we did start, just to show you the journey of this project. We started in the project in the fall, and we had in October, my colleague Alex Velsink had a sort of a really brief sort of session with the PMAC, the Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee, and heard some of the feedback in terms of like, what are the key issues we should be focusing in on. So here, and then we did the review. We developed this draft report that now you've heard the sort of our findings, and I'm also keen to hear like, are we missing anything? That we will then complete the report, the effectiveness review based on your feedback, and then TNRD staff will then submit that as per the promise to the ministry. Once it's done, sometime this summer. But just as a conclusion, I think there's nothing major. I think we're saying continue with your the implementation of your regional solid waste management plan. It is due to be renewed before March 26, 2030, and there's no reason to renew it earlier than this. So we have just highlighted like the need for planning ahead for budgeting for the renewal of your plan. And then we have also provided staff with like a bit of a roadmap of like what that renewal process could look like. So with that, I'm keen to hear some feedback and any questions that people have, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see people.
Thank you so much for that presentation and in-depth information that we need moving forward for the next 5 years. Any directors have any questions for the consultant? Director Grenier, Vice Chair Grenier. Oh, Director Blackwell.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. That was very interesting. One thing that came to mind yesterday or Monday when we did the tour of some of the facilities around town here, and you brought up the hazardous waste facility that's new here, that is very accessible. With sort of other things that we've seen in the past, do you feel that there's a potential for a decline in the sort of surge that might come from opening one of these facilities with everybody basically doing 15 to 20 years of spring cleaning of the, everything they've have kicking around their house. Because, in my mind, if it is that popular and demand is increasing, then maybe we need to think about demand, increasing a facility. But I also think that there's probably some likelihood that there is a surge because Granddad kept that in his basement for 45 years.
Great. Shall I respond to that?
Please.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a really good point. And I think that is something that I know the TNRD staff also as a sort of ramp, as a lead up to opening that facility. I think there was even some of the roundup events that were canceled just because they were sort of. So I think there was certainly a bit of a stockpiling of these materials. I think that's a really good point. I think time will tell whether it sort of flattens out. I'm hoping that it will. Otherwise, you sort of wonder where all these materials are coming from. But I think that is something that staff are really looking at. And I think because it is co-funded with the city of Kamloops, I think there's a cost sharing arrangement there. So it's not all on the TNRD, but maybe can I pass it on to Adriana if you had anything to add there about the household hazardous waste facility?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good summary of what we think we saw when the facility opened. We did miss the fall roundup events, thinking the facility was going to open. It took longer to open than we had anticipated. So people that would have normally participated in that annual roundup event missed the opportunity. And with it being open 5 days a week, centrally located in Kamloops, we are seeing a large influx of material over the first few months of the facility being open. We're watching the costs very closely. They've gone down over the winter time as expected, picking up a little bit more now that it's spring. We're not seeing quite the volume of material coming in at the start of spring compared to what we saw at the start of May when the facility opened. So we're continuing to keep a close eye on things and hoping things kind of find an even place. But it was difficult to project how much material would come into the facility. We do pay like a monthly facility fee and then unit charges for all the materials that do come in. So that's how the agreement is structured with the depot.
Yeah, thank you for that. That really helps me understand what's going on here. Thanks.
Chair Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little puzzled because I don't know the full story behind why the city of Kamloops and the TNRD, they're separate, but they're working together. And I'm wondering, is there contract arrangements, or maybe somebody can give me a quick summary of why it's structured the way it is and what it is?
Yeah, I could take that through the chair. So bunch of angles there. I'll start with the service. So the regional solid waste service, to my knowledge, has always excluded the city of Kamloops because the service is set up to deal with the operational cost. So the TNRD operates all the transfer stations and all the landfills that are publicly owned outside of the city of Kamloops. So using Merritt for an example, the city of Merritt runs their own garbage collection, but their garbage goes to the TNRD owned and operated landfill. So that's the idea of that municipality and all their municipalities participating into it. Whereas the city of Kamloops operationally has always been self-sufficient. They collect their own garbage, bring the garbage to their own landfill, manage their own landfill. So that's the operational component. When it comes to the solid waste management plan, which is being presented here, the actual work being done here is funded through a separate service called the Regional Solid Waste Management Planning Service, which the city of Kamloops does contribute to. Because from a Ministry of Environment point of view, all operations and solid waste management planning falls to the regional district's responsibility. So the city of Kamloops is included in our solid waste management plan. another reason why we have City of Kamloops representation at this committee. And that's why we have 2 City of Kamloops staff sitting in the back gallery participating in this as well.
Supplementary to that. So do we have a contract or contractual agreements with the city or not? And how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So we also have operational contracts with the city. So there is some services that there's a recognition that the City of Kamloops residents may utilize that are part of the TNRD system, like the household hazardous waste facility, like a portion of the cost to operate the Heffley Creek landfill, because, residents of Rayleigh are going to use the Heffley Creek site. And so we have a separate agreement with the city, an annual contribution the city contributes towards the solid waste management budget. And Adrian, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head anymore, but Adriana probably does.
Thank you. I'll just add in that a portion of that cost share agreement. So yes, we've got the Heffley Creek Eco Depot landfill, also some of our public education costs. There's a cost share there, as well as the illegal dumping program and the household hazardous waste depot.
Any other questions? Director Houghton?
Similar to Director Grenier's, is our material that we collect in the garbage containers throughout the TNRD at all the sites, does it all get funneled into the City of Kamloops landfill, or does some go to outlying? Is there ones, or does it all feed into Kamloops? And because I know we're in this partnership together in this building and in the TNRD as a group, and I can see why, but I was just wondering if all the materials ended up in Kamloops as part of their revenue.
Through the chair, we use a variety of landfills in the regional district. The waste in the western TNRD flows to the Campbell Hill landfill in Cache Creek. We also have waste flowing to our Lower Nicola landfill that's near Merritt. Waste from the Thompson Valley surrounding Kamloops area is currently flowing to the Mission Flats landfill. And all of our demolition, renovation, and construction materials flow to the Heffley Creek landfill.
Thank you. I think just finishing off on that topic, so we're not tied in to specifically sending TNRD to a certain landfill. We can utilize the ones that are closest to the area, but also here in town, do some of our waste go to Kamloops as well, and we can divert that without breaking any agreement that we have with anybody else?
Yes, that is correct. We have sent a couple of test loads to the Grasslands to Kamloops landfill, our big B train trailers, to see how that would work. So we brought a couple of test loads there. There's no contract agreement in place right now for where waste is hauled from the TNRD facilities.
Thank you for that. And without any other questions, and I would thank the consultant again for that in-depth report. And this is just for information only. So we will move on to item number 6.2, the 2024 regional wide waste composition study. And that will be by Manager Vieira.
Yeah, it says my name on there, but it'll actually be Manager Mayu.
Thank you very much. And we're just learning on Teams here. So I've got to do my screen share. There we go. We've got that up. Okay, wonderful. There we go. Perfect. So the first report that I'll speak to today is the 2024 region-wide waste composition study. This was touched on in the 5-year effectiveness review. You saw one of the charts there that was presented that came from this study. So we'll dive into that a little bit further and show you the results of what we found. So the purpose of doing a waste audit is we want to analyze our waste data from various transfer stations of different sizes. We have different levels of service in the TNRD, so we're trying to take a look at each of those levels to see what's going on in the waste stream. We're looking for correlations or examining correlations with our community demographics across the regional district. We really want to try to assess material diversion potential through recycling and EPR programs that are available, and also try to identify opportunities for new waste management initiatives in the district. We used Tetra Tech Canada consultants for this project. They also completed the prior waste audit that we did in 2021. And part of the scope of their project was to compare the results between 2021 and 2024. So how we've split things up in the waste audit, we've got small transfer station, medium transfer station, large transfer station. In those categories, small transfer station is accepting under 100 tons of waste per year. Medium transfer station is between 101 to 999 tons per year. Large transfer station is over 1,000 tons per year. We also looked at residential curbside collection, which is curbside garbage that is collected primarily from single-family households. And we also examined the demolition, renovation, and construction waste stream. This again, you just saw this chart in the previous presentation. This is showing the TNRD's waste per capita. So that's how much garbage each person in the regional district is creating every year. And this is our trending data from 2015 to 2023. The TNRD line is on the top. We have been increasing over the last number of years, noting that we have seen a decrease in 2023. Down to 591 kilograms per person. We still have a ways to go to meet that 500 kilogram per person target by 2028. The line below is the provincial average. So to complete this work, it actually took place at the TNRD's operations yard located at 660 Mission Flats Road. All of the transfer station samples and curbside samples came to our public works yard where the Tetra Tech team went through them to do their categorization. The DRC, which is demolition, renovation, construction samples, that was a visual assessment that was conducted at the Kamloops Resource Recovery Facility. And we did the study from December 9th to the 13th of 2024. So looking at the transfer station and curbside methodology, so the samples were pre-selected and collected by TNRD staff and then analyzed by the Tetra Tech consultants. The waste was delivered in mega bags, which held between 120 and 150 kilograms of waste per bag. And we labeled all of those to keep them organized at the yard. Then there's hand sorting of the materials. So the team goes through each bag, they open them up, and then they hand sort all of that material into different bins where they then weigh them and record all of the results. This is showing you what one of the mega bags looks like before they sort it. This is the team moving around some of the mega bags. So they're quite heavy, you put them on pallets and then use the pallet jack to move them around. We repurposed one of our storage buildings for the waste audit to keep it kind of out of the way, and that worked really well for us. And here's the team sorting out the materials. Not the most pleasant job, but this team is pretty passionate about what they do, and we're very thankful for that. So when we're looking at the DRC loads, so this was done a little bit differently. The Tetra Tech team went out to the landfill and then they did a visual assessment of the loads that were being dumped. When the loads arrived, the team would confirm the load details with the driver. The load would be sent over the scale and then it would be dumped at the active face of the landfill. And then the team would conduct a visual assessment of the material. And they were specifically looking for loads that contained large bulky items and not very much bagged household waste. And then what they did is they estimated the volume of the materials and then they classified those into primary and secondary categories. And then they did, they recorded their data and logged everything. So we'll jump into the results of that here in a moment. Here's the truck dumping at the facility. One of the loads that was assessed. Here's the field team visually inspecting the load contents. All right, and so what are the categories that we're looking at here? So we're looking for transfer stations and curbside. There's 12 primary categories and 73 secondary categories. And then for the DRC waste stream, 12 primary categories and 78 secondary categories. The primary categories are paper, plastic, compostable organics, non-compostable organics, metal, glass, building materials, electronics, household hazardous waste, household hygiene, bulky objects, and fines. And keep in mind, for each category, there will be different diversion potential for each of those things. So it's easy to see paper in the pie chart and think, oh, that's all recyclable. Paper will also contain items that actually are not recyclable. So they could have a different categorization for their end use. I'll explain that a little bit more as we go through. So the different categories, looking at them a little bit more closely. If it's recyclable, these are materials that are accepted in a curbside recycling bin or at a depot. Drop-off items are items that can be dropped off separately, or they might require some sort of special disposal. This can be things like books, textiles, styrofoam, film packaging, glass, shingles, household hazardous waste. If we see the term residual, this means non-divertible waste that's sent to landfill. Compostable is organic waste suitable for composting, so things like food waste, yard waste, and wooden utensils. And then extended producer responsibility, often just called EPR, are things that are accepted at local depots, such as batteries, electronics, paint, small appliances, used oil. Okay, when we look at the different sectors, so small, medium, large transfer station, residential, curbside, here are the different tonnages that are flowing through those different levels of facilities, and what percentage of the sector they make up. So in the TNRD, looking at small transfer stations, this makes up 2% of the waste stream. Material coming from medium transfer stations makes up 21% of the waste stream. Large transfer stations, 48% of the waste stream. Residential curbside collection, 29% of the total waste stream. So it's important to get an idea of what level of materials flowing through these different avenues. So looking at the overall garbage composition, this is what the waste stream is looking like. So our key categories here are compostable organics being 36%, paper 17%, plastic 14%, household hygiene 15%. This totals 82% of the waste stream. When we're looking more closely at compostable organics, there are several categories there. We've got avoidable food waste, which is 24.7%. These are things like whole fruits and veggies, moldy bread, leftover lasagna, things that we bought, we put them in the fridge, we didn't use them, and then we put them in the garbage. We also have a category called backyard compostable. So these are like fruit and veggie peelings, coffee grounds, eggshells that could easily go in a backyard composter. That's making up 8.2% of the compostable organics. Looking at the plastic waste a little more closely, we've got film and packaging is 3.5%. Recyclable rigid plastics are 3.2%. And then there's another portion of that that's also non-recyclable plastics, things like plastic toys, squeezy tubes. So there's quite a few things in that category. Looking at paper, 7.9% in that category is compostable and food soiled paper. 3.1% is boxboard and 2.1% is fine paper. Household hygiene, the majority of this category are things like cat litter, dog waste, material that's coming out of the bathroom garbage, diapers, sanitary products, etc. Non-compostable organics is 6%. These are products like treated wood, textiles, and other non-compostable organics, things like candles, waxes, rubbers, wicker baskets. Sorry, and before I jump ahead there, it's also interesting, we saw this in the very similar results in the 2021 waste audit. There's always a very small percentage, 1 or 2%, which is household hazardous waste and electronics. It's always a small amount of this material coming into the system. And batteries is a big concern of ours. They pose a large risk for both personnel in the at a recycling center if they get recycled incorrectly. They also pose risks for collection staff and facility staff if they're put in the garbage. So you see a lot of messaging coming out about making sure batteries are brought back to the correct location. And that's why they have potential to start fire kind of no matter where you put them if it's not in the right designated spot for battery recycling. Then we have a small amount of building materials, glass, and metal. So region-wide, looking at the overall diversion potential, we can see that this is where we get the statistic of 75% of our waste stream having the potential to be diverted. 44% of that is compostable material, 15% is drop-off material, 13% is recyclable, 3% is EPR, so extended producer responsibility. Looking at the small transfer stations, we sampled the Lac Lejeune transfer station for this information. It's interesting to look across the different categories to see what the changes are when there's different levels of service available at the facility. So we're talking about a small transfer station. This is basic household garbage and household recyclables. So your printed paper and packaging. There's really no other options for diversion at those facilities. So you tend to see more items end up in that waste stream because it's not as accessible for people to recycle their other materials at that location. So here we see that compostable organics is 31%, paper is a very large chunk at 33%, followed by household hygiene, 13%, and plastics at 11%. In the compostable organics category, the majority here was mainly avoidable food waste at 16%. Small transfer station diversion potential, we are at 76%, with compostable materials being 40%, recycling 26%, drop-off 8%, and EPR 2% of that waste stream. One thing to keep in mind as well is we'll get into some of the comparisons later on. The 2021 audit was conducted in the spring, and this audit was conducted in December. So I think we see some seasonal variation there as well, especially with organics. Not everybody wants to go drop off their compost in the backyard composter when it's really cold outside. So I think we're seeing some higher organics as a result of the time of year. So here's the trend information comparing 2021 to 2024. So some of the notable changes here, it's a little bit hard to see the colors, but the purple blocks on the top, we've got household hygiene, so we see an increase there. The light green is compostable organics. We see a pretty large increase here from 13% in 2021 up to 31% in 2024. And also a large increase or a notable increase in the paper stream from 18% up to 33%. And then interesting as well, building materials in 2021, 18% of this waste stream was building materials, and that decreased to 0 in this audit. Now moving over to medium transfer stations. So the samples that we collected here were from Clinton, Heffley Creek, Knutsford, Savannah, 70 Mile, and Sun Peaks. So the overall waste stream there, the key categories, compostable organics at 38%, paper at 16%, household hygiene at 14%, plastic at 12%, equaling 80% of the total waste stream. Again, similar here, avoidable food waste is 25.6%. Backyard compostable is 8.1%. And in this sampling, we saw 3.1% yard and garden waste. Looking at the diversion potential here, same as small transfer station, total diversion potential is 76%, with a large amount of that being the compostables. So this is things like yard and garden waste, food waste. It also includes clean wood, plus soil and sod, compostable paper products like paper towels, tissues, paper plates, unlined paper takeout food containers, and paper straws. Got a larger amount of drop-off materials at 16% and recycling at 12% and 2% EPR. Some of the notable trends at the medium sites here, household hygiene increased from 10% to 14%, glass increased from 1% to 5%, non-compostable organics decreased from 15% to 7%, and plastics decreased from 16% to 13%. Large transfer station locations, we looked at Boston Flats, Clearwater, Lower Nicola, did a sample from the Mission Flats landfill and also the South Thompson Eco Depot. Key categories here, compostable organics, 32%, household hygiene, 19%, paper, 18%, plastic, 13%, equaling 82% of the waste stream. Avoidable food waste in this sector was 21.6%, and 7.5% was backyard compostable. Household hygiene, a large component was cat litter, 9.2%. In the plastic waste category, it was mostly film packaging and recyclable rigid plastics. And then a very small amount, 1.8% of non-recyclable plastics. And we still see those similar percentages in the EPR, electronics, and household hazardous waste. Total diversion potential at the large transfer stations has decreased to 72%. We would suspect that this is because there's more options at those sites when people go to visit them. The eco depots have full suite recycling and diversion. Looking at some trends here, plastic decreased quite significantly between 2021 and 2024 from 29% to 13%. Compostable organics increased from 28% to 32%, and household hygiene increased from 7% to 19%. Looking at the curbside samples, we examined City of Merritt, the District of Barrier, the District of Logan Lake, and then our electoral area J routes. We looked at Cherry Creek samples and Tobiano. So key categories here, we've got compostable organics going up to 40% in the residential curbside, paper at 16%, plastic at 16%, household hygiene 11%, equaling 83% of this waste stream. Looking at the total diversion potential here at 78%, with the majority being compostable material at 48%, so quite high. Drop-off materials, 15%, recyclables, 13%, and EPR materials, 2%. And the trends here, things actually stayed very similar to what they looked like in 2021. We see a slight increase in plastic from 14% to 16% in curbside. Now looking at demolition, renovation, and construction samples. And again, this was done at the Kamloops Resource Recovery Center, operated by the City of Kamloops. Key categories here are building materials at 45%, compostable organics 13%, non-compostable organics 13%, glass 11%, and this equals 82% of the waste stream. When we're talking about building materials, these are things like drywall, vinyl flooring, vinyl siding, insulation, pipes, all that stuff that's going to come from like disassembling a building, doing a renovation of some kind. Non-compostable organics, this is primarily treated wood, treated, stained, it's not clean, so it's going into the demolition stream. And glass is things like mirrors and ceramic plates. So the diversion potential in this waste stream is 22%, where we see 13% being compostable, and this is 7% yard and garden waste and 6.3% clean wood. 7% is drop-off materials, which is primarily asphalt shingles. Very small amount of recyclables and EPR at 1% each. So the notable trends here, we see a decrease in compostable organics, went from 22% to 13%. Bulky objects decreased from 12% down to 2%. This is things like white goods, mattresses, couches, wooden furniture. And we do see an increase in building materials from 24% to 46%. And again, that's things like drywall, carpet, masonry, insulation, vinyl siding, and pipes. Some of our interesting finds was a box of glass, some spray paint cans, some horse medication, and some baling twine. So next steps and conclusions. So what do we use this for? So we always use this type of information to enhance public education campaigns. We have a new set of public education banners that we're currently printing, and those will join us at our different community events this year that actually relay some of this information to people on a big banner so they can see it and come in for some engagement, and we can hopefully have that opportunity to provide some education to them and pique their interest. We also use it to inform bylaw updates. So when we're looking at continuing on with the implementation of some of our programs, we look back to these studies to show us why this is a priority, how much of it we're seeing, and what the diversion potential is. And then we also use the information to develop new programs and initiatives as we can. So one example I'll share a little bit early. We saw that books is in that drop-off category. They can't go into the Recycle BC program, hardcover or softcover books. So we're just launching this week a book recycling pilot program at 2 of our sites. And again, we use these studies to try to support reaching that goal of the reduction in waste by 2028. And with that, I am happy to take any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you so much for that. And Director Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on diversion and recycling. Is there a variation in recycling revenue that we get from different products? Like, is it more advantageous for us to promote recycling of one product over another? Or is our recycling revenue kind of flat? We get the same amount for everything?
Through the chair, that's a great question. Our recycling revenue does stay fairly even across the years when we look at the actual amounts that are coming into the budget. But some programs do pay better than other ones. So we do receive money from Recycle BC for the material that we collect, from the used oil program, from scrap metal, from cardboard. Some of those markets fluctuate over time as well. But overall, we see a pretty stable amount coming in through the revenue for all of the programs combined.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any correlation between curbside pickup and efficiencies at the dump sites and all that sort of stuff? Is there something that we should be looking to do more of, or is it just simply more expensive, that kind of thing? Any conclusions?
Through the chair, yeah, it's interesting looking at the results that things stay pretty stable in the curbside program when you're looking at what's actually going into the waste stream. It is more expensive to run a curbside program than it is to have a transfer station that people can visit. And their opportunities are a little more limited. Because when we look at medium transfer stations and larger transfer stations, we have more opportunities for them. So when you're using a curbside bin, you can put your household waste in there, you can put a portion of your household recyclables in there, but not all of them. You still have to bring a certain amount of them to a depot anyway if you want to recycle. But even at a small transfer station, if you're self-hauling, you have access to the full depot system. So I think there's more opportunities for recycling and diversion if you're self-hauling to a facility, even if it is a small transfer station, and then your options just grow as you go to the larger facilities.
Thank you. And I think I just have one question. I think the consultant brought it up, and I noted it down when she brought national disasters up, like fires, floods. And if you look at Merritt a few years ago in Lytton, there's a lot of waste there that gets absorbed into our landfill. Where does that money come from, and do we gain for that? Does a province chip in and say, look, we're going to help you for the cleanup and the work you have to do and the effect it has to your landfill and your transfer stations? Or do we absorb that? Or does that community that it affected, does they have to absorb it?
Yeah, I'll jump in that one through the chair. It's a very good question. And the answer is every time it seems to be different. So let's give a little bit of a backstory. So I'll start off with this, and this has been brought to the board multiple times over the years. There is no standing policy that we waive any fees for disaster-related debris. So any debris that comes in, whether it's disaster-related or not, the regular fees are applicable. Now, depending on the year and what type of disaster it is, there's been three models, I guess. One where the province has agreed to pay the disposal fees. So the atmospheric river being an example of that. The cleanup initiative being run within the city of Merritt. All the fees were covered by the province when it came to the landfill. So we received our appropriate gate revenue to cover our operational costs for all that debris. There's been some fire-related programs or wildfire-related programs that were not funded by the province, but were funded by an NGO like the Red Cross, where there was a process where residents could apply to get reimbursed for the disposal fees. And then there's other disasters where there's no program and it doesn't get covered. This is kind of seems to be a theme and a challenge in our disaster recovery that if someone's house burns down or gets flooded, it's the same level of disaster to them. But if it's only one house or two houses, it doesn't seem to get the attention, provincially or federally, and therefore there's not as many programs available. So in those cases, there's no program, they pay the fees. There's been a few one-offs where there's been some community support or fundraising covered, or electoral area directors using discretionary funds for assistance. But sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but generally speaking, we receive the revenue for all that disaster debris that comes into our sites.
Thank you for that. So in a long-winded question that I had, at the end of the day, we're probably not getting the money that we are entitled to. Somewhere we're going to be shortchanged. Is there anything this committee could do for the province instead of, like you said, the Red Cross, or we have to go over to this agency for money, or the province? Is there not something that we can do for the province? Ask the province to cover it, whatever the disaster is, natural disaster, and let them figure out where that money's coming from. Would that help?
So we're not being shortchanged. We are charging for all the garbage that comes in. It's more from the resident or the business that's impacted, depending on the year. Sometimes there's a program to help them, or sometimes there's not. So we are receiving the revenue to cover operational costs on our end. So I think that's more of an advocacy for residents during or following an emergency that this board can be involved in. And I guess I would stress that that this board and committee not consider the challenge is when disaster strikes, what we've seen, not just at this board, but around the province, boards and councils tend to want to just waive all the fees to help the people out, which is an option, but as staff, we'd be reminding you that means we don't have funding that the revenue that we were expected to get to cover our operating cost, which means come budget time, we need more taxation to offset what normally would come in as revenue.
And I totally agree with that. I guess I need some clarification. So like a city like Merritt had the flood a few years ago. They've asked all the residents to put everything out on the curb. That's not, it's not inhabitable. They got to pick it up. So the city is going to be in charge of picking all that up and taking the landfill. So that cost is going to be on the city of Merritt. And that's where I'm saying that's where we should be. I hope with the boards, we should be supporting the city of Merritt, saying that shouldn't be on them. They shouldn't be paying for that tipping fee for us. A higher level of government should be covering that cost because they don't have that money, and nor should it be their responsibility.
Yes, that's correct. And that, depending on the disaster, will change the amount of funding, or if there's funding available.
Now that I've got Vice Chair Grenier on board.
So in the Savannah situation, was garbage pickup part of the disaster financial assistance qualifying stuff?
No, that was all funded through donation, private donation. Who was the donor for that? Recall? I think that was, yeah. Yeah, Terrace and Highland Valley were supporting that, yeah. And Bridge, yeah. Yeah. So that was an example where, yeah, there was no provincial funding to cover those cleanup costs, but it was covered through a different revenue source.
Thank you for that. And with that, any other questions from Director Onslow?
Thank you for that. Excuse me. I just, from seeing your presentation, it seems that the organics is such a large portion of the waste. And I'm thinking about the very rural communities where the transportation cost must be extreme to be transporting what could be composted. And so I'm curious at some point in the future if we would look at the TNRD operated compost facilities or in small or in the very rural areas, or is that something that we would want industry to come in and say, we'll do this composting operation for a charge? Like, could it be TNRD managed or not?
Thank you through the chair to Director Onslow. We do have a few key initiatives and strategies in the regional solid waste management plan that we've trying to been implementing over the last couple of years. One of them being the community composting pilot for just that reason. How can we manage it in these communities at a low cost and divert that material? We've had a few different conversations about the community pilot program, and we do have a pretty strong contender right now in Chase. We're in some discussions with the community there, and hopefully we can move forward fairly soon with implementing a community composting program there. And what that would look like is near a community garden, building a pretty basic cedar compost system with 3 wooden bins. You have somebody that's involved from the community who can assist in the management of it, and also surrounding homes can participate as a way to divert their food waste. So really hopeful to get that launched and actually off the ground. And hopefully once we have one successful community, we can grow that to others. And we have another initiative to look for organics options for the community of Sun Peaks. That community being very unique with the restaurants that are there. They're producing a large amount of food waste. There was a pilot program where we were composting, did a trial composting organic waste from restaurants with the biosolids in enclosed containers that were run by the municipality, but they ran into some issues with those and actually shut them down. And now they're exporting or sending their biosolids, I believe, to Armstrong. I could be incorrect on that, but they're not staying in the community any longer. And so the food waste is not being composted. So we're continuing to look for some solutions there. And the best option in that community might be private collection service, especially now that at the Squetstum facility, the Tecumloops Grasslands Partnership, that's got an organics processing facility. And it's, right down the road from Sun Peaks. So that would be a lot easier now for a commercial contractor to service that material and then bring it to that facility. So we're continuing to work on things. It's just been a little bit slow to actually get them off the ground, unfortunately.
Seeing no further questions, and this was a recommendation only. Thank you again for that report. We'll move on to 6.3. Clean Farms Agricultural Plastic Pilot Scope and Funding Update. And Manager Vieira.
Yeah, I'll start off with that one. So thank you, Chair. So this is a follow-up to the proposed agricultural plastics pilot program that was presented to this committee in the fall. So if you recall back, we presented a proposal which included some grant funding opportunities that we were told that were available. So we built that into the budget, which was part of the approved budget in the 2025 budget for the pilot program. Since the last meeting of this committee, we were notified that the grant opportunities were not available and we did not qualify for those grant opportunities. So what Adriana will be presenting is essentially a scaled down version of that pilot program. So this is going forward with the assumption, or not the assumption, we have the funding in our approved budget to run this pilot, but this is the scaled down version she's created. We have not altered our plans in not receiving that funding, but if this committee wants to consider or discuss changes to those plans because that funding ended, that we could have that discussion. But just note, this is the scaled down version to what was presented in the fall. So that's why we're bringing it back to this committee. And I'll pass it over to Ms. Mayo.
Thank you. Okay, so as a refresher, the Clean Farms Agricultural Plastic Recycling Pilot, this would be a partnership with the Clean Farms organization. They're a nonprofit stewardship organization supporting Canadian farmers. They collaborate with members, partners, and government to promote responsible waste management. They create impactful programs that drive sustainability in agriculture, and they provide solutions for agricultural waste disposal and recycling, fostering a healthier environment. The program scope that we're discussing is recycling options for bale wrap, silage film, and small amounts of twine. Building off of what Mr. Vieira just said, the update today is an updated scope of this program due to the loss of the grant funding. In fall of 2024, this committee was involved in approving the pilot program in the TNRD, and it was included in the 5-year financial plan. The format for that included collection and recycling of bale and silage wrap at all TNRD facilities, and also on-farm compacting and baling. This would be 33% funded by the TNRD and 67% grant funded. And unfortunately, we do not have that grant funding. So we've revised the scope of the program to be on-farm baling only with no collection at TNRD solid waste facilities. And this allows us to implement a pilot program using the original TNRD only funds of the 33% of the original costs. So just a reminder what that had looked like previously. We were hopeful to have 50% funded by the Canadian Agricultural Strategic Priorities Program. That would have been $207,700. Unfortunately, we were not successful. That was actually an application that Clean Farms had put forward to the federal government that was not approved. And then the TNRD applied to the provincial funding, which was the Clean BC Agricultural Plastics. And that we were hoping to cover 18% for $72,700. And then the TNRD was contributing $134,600, nearly $700 to the program. The key change here is shifting to on-farm collection only with no depot collection or public drop-off. So this is just farmers doing on-farm compaction for their materials. This reduces costs and also avoids contamination in the system. You're able to work more closely with each of those farm partners. So revised funding breakdown only coming from the TNRD with no grant funding. So it's a 4-year pilot, and the total cost of that would be $134,687. And this is the material that we're talking about. So bale wrap is what's being wrapped around those big, large hay bales to preserve them, and silage plastic being wrapped over the long windrows of silage. These are the compactors, what they would look like. They're pretty basic units where you can have essentially like a cage with a concrete block that's lowered in. You put your material in there and the block compresses it into a bale, and then you remove that from the machine and just store it. Once there's enough bales, they would be collected and then transported to recycling facilities. There's also some different options to have manual or hydraulic systems, and we're still working with Clean Farms for some templates on what those could look like, but these are what the options are. So from a waste reduction perspective, we estimate that we could be diverting 66,000 kilograms of agricultural plastic from our landfill with this revised scope, which is still a significant amount of material. And the farm partnerships that we would be looking at is to have 9 farm partners that are using composter or compactors, with 5 farms joining in 2025. So the major cost reductions here to lower this number is not having any collection bags at TNRD facilities. So that saves $17,600. No depot bailing saves $40,000, and lowered transportation costs is saving $76,450. So again, the original budget, this would have cost $414,000, reduced down to $134,000. This is what the cost would look like over the 4-year pilot. So this has been included in the 5-year financial plan. So in 2025, a cost of $36,900. In 2026, $36,750. A drop in 2027 because you're purchasing the compactors in the first 2 years. So lowered expenses in year 3, $26,400, and then $34,500 in the final year. And that's when you're exporting all the product that has been stockpiled and sending it out. So the collection process here, again, there's no public drop-off. It's only for the participating farms. They'll use the compactors themselves to condense the bale in the silage wrap. When they have enough bales, then Clean Farms helps organize transportation to recycling facilities, and those are located in both Canada and the US. And so what are they doing with this material? So bale wrap, once they're processing bale wrap, it's being turned into things like garbage bags, flexible films and packaging, and plastic lumber products. The recyclers for this type of material, they are located in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and some in the USA. For silage film and products for this material includes new agricultural film plastics, plastic bags, construction sheeting, composite dimensional lumber, and agricultural fence posts. And the recyclers are located in Alberta and the US. For outreach and education, we would be doing on-farm training and workshops with the farm partners for proper collection practices and providing resources and signage to ensure program success. The goal in the farm partnership is to try to reach sort of the 4 corners of the TNRD to make sure that we've got good representation. To date, we have expression of interest from actually 5 farms now. We've been working with Director Houghton. Thank you for the farm partners that we can partner with for the program. So the next steps here are to continue the farmer engagement piece and finalizing those partnerships. Right now, there are more expressions of interest. We wanted to make sure that we knew where the conversation was going today before finalizing anything. If we're moving forward, then we'll implement the pilot and then assess its success over the span of the project. And one of the really great things, if we can move ahead with this, is helping to inform EPR policy development. This is being talked about at that higher provincial level, is having an EPR program for materials like this. And if we have data to share with them, that's very helpful for them to know what's going on in the regional district. So it allows us to better advocate for these materials to be included in an extended producer responsibility program. And with that, I am happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for that. I remember how excited we were when Director Houghton brought this forward and the impact that we're going to have. I'm still very glad that it's still, there's still a piece of it that's going to be implemented. And any questions for staff? Director Houghton?
Thanks, Chair Grenier or Sarai. Adriana, I think the way I understand it, we're only doing the plastic portion of what we originally. So it'll be your silage wrap and your big long tubes that cover either bales or silage. So there will be no net wrap or baler twine that'll be part of this program that we were going to do it before, because your people that we're going to target to do these pilots will depend on the high use of the plastics then versus the baler twine and the net wrap, because every round bale that you see out in the field that's covered with plastic has either baler twine on it or net wrap. So really you're dealing with at least 2 commodities on every bale. So one of them, it sounds like we are going to target to recycle, which is the plastic, but not the twine and the net wrap. So your target ranchers and farmers may be different than what we started out with. So I'll gladly help you on the four corners to get you the key people that use a lot of plastic. So thank you.
I'll just have a quick question there. In the report, it says 8 or 9 large operations that will be, some equipment will be given to them. Will they be able to help assist other farmers around them if they brought their material over? And are we signing any agreements to them? Is it just, we're gonna trust that they're gonna use this to the best of their ability to help divert this away? Or is there an agreement in there that they have to show that they've used it and how much they've sent every year so we know that it's being used? If not, then we can give it to another farmer that's on the list that would require it.
Absolutely. I think it'd be a great idea to have a basic agreement with the farm partners for use of that equipment. They would absolutely be able to do farm sharing partnerships. So if a nearby farm wanted to consolidate their plastics, they could do that. I believe it's in McBride, where they've done this pilot previously. They had multiple farms sharing one compactor, and that worked very well in that community. So that's absolutely an option as well.
Thank you for that information. And on that, there was recommendation as again, information only. And like I said, I'm glad that it's still on track, even in a small way. Thank you. 6.4 operation update and manager. Melu.
Oh, thank you again. Always a lot of talking. Hopefully you're not tired of listening to me yet. So I always like to provide an operations update just so that you can get a feel for kind of what we're up to in the solid waste department, what's going on out there, kind of have a look at what's going on around the region. So I've got a few highlights to share with you today. So the first piece is some updates on our capital projects and where we're at. So I'm excited to let you know that we have purchased some iron grizzly bars, and this is an alternative daily landfill cover system. So every day at the landfill, you need to cover the material at the end of the day to prevent vectors from coming in, control odors and litter. So what this new system is, it's a set of metal plates that you put down. Alternatively to that, people use soil or tarps. So we're excited that this is at our Lower Nicola facility now. Some of the benefits to using a system like this is helping conserve airspace in the landfill. So you're eliminating using bulky cover soil, helps maximize your landfill capacity. There's some cost and time savings in reducing labor, fuel, and material costs. They're very durable. You can use them for a really, really long time. They help to prevent litter and wildlife attractants. And they're also more eco-friendly because you're minimizing soil excavation and carbon emissions. So here's a picture of what they look like. So those have just arrived at the Lower Nicola facility recently. These cost $52,000 and they were funded from the Carbon Neutral Reserve. Following along, we've purchased 2 new 20-yard half bins. We use these bins in the TNRD system for specialty hauling. So we use these for things like shingles, concrete, invasive plants, mixed demolition, and potentially asbestos-containing materials. So we're excited to have 2 more in the fleet. These are really versatile little bins that you can do a lot with. So we're excited about that. They hold up to 3,600 kilograms or 8,000 pounds of material, and they're easy to move around and place on site. You may have noticed these in different locations at the site that you visit. These were 8,900 each. That's a picture of what they look like. I would like to give an update on the Sun Peaks compactor project. So at the Sun Peaks transfer station, again, this is a very unique location. There is a huge amount of waste that flows through the Sun Peaks site with the tourism that we have in Sun Peaks. About 500 tons of garbage flows through that site annually and about 94 tons of cardboard. So every day you can be switching out that bin in busy season. Sometimes they need to report those bin levels twice a day because they fill up so fast. So to create efficiencies at that location, we'll be installing compactors. And so those squish the garbage down, squish the cardboard down to a smaller size. So you get more capacity out of that bin. So we're looking to do an installation of these units in the second quarter here. We're still waiting to finalize the exact dates, but now that things have slowed down in shoulder season, we'll be getting these installed over about a week-long period. And here's what they look like. So there's actually 3 bays at the Sun Peaks transfer station. One of these will be dedicated for garbage, the other dedicated for cardboard. And then we still have a third space for a bin along this wall that we can use for overflow if it's needed. And so what happens with these is the waste is actually contained in their in the unit, so you need to have 2 to actually swap them out. So we'll do a staging at Heffley Creek because these are unique bins. We use 50-yard roll-off bins everywhere else or B-train trailers. So this will be a unique system that'll be set up at Sun Peak soon. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but touching on it again, we'll be launching a book recycling pilot program at the South Thompson Eco Depot and the Westwold Transfer Station. These are totes that you can put hardcover or softcover books in. Again, they're not accepted in the Recycle BC program, so people don't have a lot of options for them. The company is called Planet Earth Recycling. The same service is available at the City of Kamloops. They've been running this program successfully for a few, 4 months? Oh, 3 years? Okay. Long time. That's great. Yeah, so we're excited to have that option for residents, and we're hopeful to expand that to other facilities. I'd like to give a quick update on our mandatory recyclable material bylaw, especially as we're seeing how much recycling is still in the garbage. How are we doing on the mandatory recyclable bylaw? So for a quick refresher, we started this bylaw in 2022, and at that time it only focused on corrugated cardboard. In March 2024, we updated it to include all products that are regulated under the recycling regulation. And right now we're exploring, what are the next steps in expanding that bylaw to include divertible building materials. This is the list of items that it currently does focus on. So again, corrugated cardboard and then all provincially regulated recyclables. Update on the inspection. So from September 22 until present, we've performed 3,600 inspections. 1,700 of those have been on commercial loads and 1,900 on residential loads. 166 warnings have been issued, 22 tickets have been issued, and we do find a compliance rate of 95% in the loads that are inspected. So far in 2025, we've completed 427 inspections, with 82 of those being commercial, 345 being residential. 16 warnings have been issued, and so that's just a verbal conversation with somebody, and then 1 ticket has been issued. So finding a compliance rate of 96%. As you can see, though, with the results we saw in the waste audit, there's a lot happening in the residential garbage that we're not catching. So that's why you're seeing kind of a shift here to focusing on residential loads and really a focus on engagement and education with customers. Our approach is not heavy enforcement, it's education and compliance. We have seen success here in this bylaw diverting commercial cardboard. So this is showing you the tonnage over the last 4 years, and you can see that we're increasing in the amount of commercial cardboard that we're collecting. So that's fantastic. And showing you some examples of what these loads look like. So here are some compliant loads where we're not seeing outwardly any contamination or recyclables in these loads. Got Lewis Creek Eco Depot, South Thompson Eco Depot, and the Boston Flats Eco Depot. Everything looks good. But unfortunately, not all the loads look like that. Here are some non-compliant loads where clearly the amount of cardboard is exceeding the 10% threshold. So this is where there'll be a conversation with the hauler. And if this goes on several times, eventually they end up facing a fine for bringing loads like this into the facilities. The picture on the right is from Mission Flats. Or sorry, yeah, the picture on the right is from Mission Flats, and the one on the left is from the Clearwater Eco Depot. This was another interesting load. I think this was at Clearwater. This was a real mixed bag. So there was a, yeah, a freezer and a stove. What's that? Freezer and a stove, 13 oil pails, a tire. And then after diversion, there's really not much left over. Like this load was, the majority of it was divertible material. And this load could have potentially received $800 in fines. At this stage, it was still educational. We had the conversation. They removed the recyclables, so they did not get a fine, but that's what the fine could have looked like.
Director Blackwell?
Yeah, thank you. As I've sort of indicated, I've seen loads worse than that in Clearwater, at the Eco Depot. But noting, because I know where everything comes from, I can tell that these were commercial loads so how does that play out in the fine process? It is still a fine for, because there's a commercial diversion program separate from our residential, is that, so.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, so in that load, it was a commercial load and they would be eligible for a fine. Where we sort of draw the line between the residential and commercial is when it comes to the household packaging. So if it's come from a home, but it's being carried in by a commercial hauler and it's residential printed paper and packaging, that's not eligible, but the rest of the list is. So the bulky material you saw there, the tire, the oil pails, the fridges and the stoves, commercial haulers are still subject to fine. Yeah.
And if I could add to that, just for clarity, often we get questions from the commercial hauler saying, well, I have no control of what goes in here. And really, they do. It's their customers who are putting stuff in there. So our bylaw is written very intentionally that the hauler is responsible. So it doesn't matter who put it in the back of the hauler's truck, the hauler is responsible. So then they're responsible for having that trickle down to communicate with their customers. And we do have material and work with the haulers to help them communicate with the customers, but it's ultimately their responsibility to communicate with their own customers.
Director Houghton?
Sort of, excuse me, adding to that, say at a transfer station where you've got various attendees, at different sites at any given time, people are bringing in all their stuff and have various places they can put it. At the end of a day, you probably get different attendees with different ways of possibly helping I call it the customers, it's the residents. And do you see variations in the bins that come from the different depots going in? And if so, is the firm that we have hired to look after the depots responsible for what goes into those bins?
Thank you through the chair to Director Houghton. The site attendants, one of their primary duties is to screen loads and engage with the customers and provide education. So making sure that they connect with them, what do you have, where can it go, and assist them in putting things in the proper location. This is where the waste audit is really interesting because you're looking at small, medium, large transfer station to see what are the differences in our own bins in the system. But as a reminder, site attendants are not giving fines. Under the bylaw, only the bylaw officer can issue a fine. So attendants are providing education and assistance. The bylaw enforcement officer is doing the enforcement piece. Yeah.
And to add to that, the specific question around, is the contractor responsible? No, they're not responsible. So there's no penalty to the attendants if there's recyclables ending up in the bin. Yeah, that would be us on our own inspector charging us, I guess, yeah. But actually, our own bins are exempt because the idea is that the bylaw is applicable at where it is disposed of by the customer. So we don't double inspect a load. So if it's going in and the customer, whether it's commercial or residential, is bringing it to the South Thompson Eco Depot, then it's not going to be inspected again when it goes to the landfill once it's in our container.
And I think just with that, it's not isolated just to TNRD. I think the city had the same issue with contractors dropping out bins at construction sites and then picking it up and saying that I'm not sure what's in there. I didn't know. So I think what Manager Farrell's here as well. I think what we did or what we encourage them to do is leave a checklist off where you drop the bin off, and now they can check off what they put in there. But ultimately, when you bring that load to the landfill, you are ultimately responsible for what you're bringing there. So I'm concerned, but I'm happy it's just not happening to the city of Kamloops. And that's a completion of that report.
Almost. Okay, so just sharing with you some of the materials that we're noting in the loads. So some of the main things that we observe are continue to be cardboard, electronics, oil containers and filters, residential packaging and printed paper, and refundable beverage containers, which is fairly surprising to me how many of those end up in the waste stream. And some other materials that we're noting during these inspections are clean wood, asphalt products, and drywall. I'll provide an update on the work that we did in 2024 in the illegal dumping program. In 2024, we removed over 90 metric tons of illegally dumped material from the TNRD, and for a fun equivalent, that is the weight of 9 orcas. So we can visualize it. But we've been busy out there. The total program spending last year was just under $36,000. We cleaned 24 sites. So we did 10 in the TNRD. Some notable ones were done in Lower Nicola, Big Bar, 70 Mile, Cache Creek, and Barrier. And then we did 14 in what we call the fringe zone. So this is like a 10-kilometer buffer outside the city of Kamloops. And so for those areas, we cleaned Lac du Bois, Barnhart Vale, Heffley Creek, and Scudo Lake. And we also assisted 6 community groups with their community cleanups. So for those cleanup events, we have a kit that can be signed out. We provide vests, litter pickers, and some signage for them. And then the TNRD will waive the tipping fees for that material to come in for disposal. So those groups included the Botany Creek Community Group, Chase Environmental Action Society, Clearwater did a pitch-in event, the Paul and Pinnetan Lake Community Association did a cleanup, and so did the Fire Association, and the Spence's Bridge Community Association completed a cleanup as well. In the 5-year effectiveness review, we touched on the success that we've had with our GIS program in the illegal dumping program, and it's really working great. So our GIS department here developed an application that staff and our contractor can use, as well as anyone who reports a dump site on our website. That report comes in, it goes right into the program. Staff can see it. It includes pictures, details. They can action it, verify the materials, and then assign it to the contractor. The contractor logs into the app. They get their list of sites. We record all the information in there. So the cost of the cleanup, the dumping fees, and now we have all of this information aggregated in the system, which is awesome. It makes it really easy for us to know what's going on and what work we've completed, and make sure that we're staying on top of sites that are reported and making sure that we get back to everybody. So looking at a few of the noteworthy cleanups. So we did one in Big Bar out in the Clinton 70 Mile area. There was a lot of yard waste at this location, and in total, we were managing 112 tons of material. This was a multi-agency effort, which included participation with High Bar First Nation, the Conservation Officer Service, and BC Wildfire. There was so much yard waste here that it was not removed from the site, but BC Wildfire assisted with doing a controlled burn in November. And then there's ongoing monitoring by High Bar First Nation as stewards of the land. So 62 tons of material was removed from the site and 50 tons was burned on site. Total cleanup costs were about $13,479, with 9,000 of that being contractor costs and 3,800 being disposal fees. And these pictures are maybe a little bit small, but you can see that this was pretty extensive. So we had, what happened here is it started as a yard waste site and then it just grew. So we've got furniture, tires, demo, yard waste, land clearing debris, clean wood, decking. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff there. What's great though is that the site has been physically deactivated, so you can't drive in there any longer to help keep it clean. And then there's some signage that's been posted as well. Another noteworthy site was done in Lower Nicola. So this was located off of Aberdeen Road. And this was one main site and then 4 smaller sites. There's 23 tons of material removed here, with the cleanup cost totaling around $14,000. 8,400 in contractor costs and then 5,700 in disposal fees. Materials that we found here: demolition waste, household garbage, wood, yard waste, concrete, appliances, metal, drywall, couches, bikes, and campers. And here's a look at what we saw there. This one was fairly extensive. And in this location, this is actually located very close to the Lower Nicola Eco Depot. So we did some custom signage that's been posted in the area saying no dumping, the area is under surveillance, and then information on the Lower Nicola Eco Depot, when it's open, what we can take there, with a focus on what's free to recycle. Because when we see appliances, tires, yard waste, that's all free for people to bring in, but we continually do see it accumulating in these dump sites. So an education and awareness piece. So we hope that the signage, people do consider it. And then lastly, sharing with a couple of the folks, we did a solid waste and recycling tour on Monday that some of the directors participated in. And what we were looking at as part of that was key solid waste facilities in the city of Kamloops area, looking to provide insight into solid waste operations, recycling processes, and landfill management. So we went to the Cinnamon Ridge composting facility and learned how organic waste is processed into compost through their open air windrow system. We went to the Squetstum Engineered Waste Management Facility, which is the new landfill that's been opened in partnership with Grasslands Organics and Kamloops Secwepnik. So it's a landfill facility and composting facility. We visited the Household Hazardous Waste Depot, which is the cost share partnership between the TNRD and the city, allowing residents a safe way to dispose of their household hazardous waste. And then we went to Mterra Environmental, and that's the material recovery facility located out in Valley View. And they process all of the single stream curbside collected recycling in the city and the TNRD. And they also accept all of the Recycle BC depot material, as well as private depot material in the regional district. So we got a tour of that facility as well. I'll share with you a picture of the group. So this was our Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee members, as well as some of the directors here who joined us. So thank you for joining the tour. I hope that you enjoyed yourselves.
I'll just add, we didn't start the fire. The fire
We
started
didn't
about
start
an
the fire.
hour after we left,
Yeah.
unrelated to our visit.
Yes, and everything is fine now at the landfill. And that concludes the operational update. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the update on when the fire started after we left. Director Stanky.
Going back to this Big Bar area, it's a growing community. There's more and more people living there year round. You've got 2 guest ranches out there. And it's going to be a growing problem in that area. Is there any way to address that? There used to be a dump site and it was deactivated. You're going to get more and more of that illegal dumping there. They're just going to create their own dump sites.
Yeah, Through the chair, yes, that is correct. There was a transfer station the TNRD operated there that was shut down as per TNRD, the board direction about 15 years ago. It is a long way from the nearest TNRD facility. We haven't heard anything directly from residents there wanting another facility, but it's something that can be explored. We haven't cited a new facility in a long time, but if there's a need, that would be the process of essentially bringing it through this committee and being a decision to increase our operating cost to put in or replace a facility that was closed down. So I'm not sure if you guys are, I'm looking at the mayor and the area director, if you're hearing from residents and businesses out that way. We haven't heard anything directly, but happy to be involved in conversations.
Supplemental?
Supplemental. Director Smith and I took a drive out there. We spoke to one of the residents. I'm not exactly sure if that resident represented the entire region or not, but how would you organize something like that? Who would you contact? There's a subdivision, guest ranches, there's all kinds of different mix in that area.
Yeah, I think starting off with just a meeting, maybe with staff and yourselves to talk about the details further, and we can talk about next steps of whether you want, bring it to the board to facilitate a process or even just a community meeting on the issue. Yeah.
Director Smith?
Yeah, what would the state of the deactivated one be in, or would that be a consideration? Would that be an easy way to get back started again, or would you be looking at a whole brand new facility?
Yeah, we'd have to look into that one. If we still have tenure, do you know, Adrian, if we still have tenure? Yeah, so that one, we don't have the tenure on it anymore. It was a landfill that was closed sometime in the 90s, I believe, that was converted to a transfer station that was closed around 2007 or 8. And that's where it exists now. Do you have anything to add? So it sounds like it'd have to start from scratch if we don't have, if we've let the 10-year lapse.
Director Blackwell?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Having worked in tourism since I was 11 or 12 years old, I'm absolutely not surprised by the amount of refundables in the waste stream. I think my staff on an average year, I'm going to go sort of 2010 would pull $10,000 worth out of our recycling system and probably leave 15 to 20,000 in the garbage stream contaminated. So it is an opportunity there. I don't know how to quite do that, but encouraging more recycling opportunities in tourism areas, especially. Second one, you mentioned Pitchin and Clearwater. That's where the residents of Clearwater put on their high vis, go around and clean up the sides of the road. Garbage bags, the 26th of April. I will be making hot dogs if any of you want to come up and help out. And another initiative we're looking at, which would also relates to eco depots, is we're looking at now that our Fire Smart team has bought a wood chipper, is doing a chip in, which would be the equivalent of bringing your residential Fire Smart materials from around your house, your shrubs and all that sort of thing to the edge of the road. We take the chipper and bins and go around town, pick it up and ship it over a couple of days. So that one, I think currently we have an agreement to bring some of that material to the Eco Depot, but we are also looking at diverting a lot of it for our biomass heat systems in Clearwater. So just a couple of thoughts there. Thanks.
And I think that's a great leadership that you're showing in your community by doing that. Yeah, well, leading it. Director Houghton.
This one's for Jamie. Do you have an update on the 4 B-Train trailers that we okayed in our meeting a couple of meetings ago, as far as have they been purchased and all that good stuff?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Houghton. We just met with both of our contractors and got feedback on the 2 units that we purchased last year to confirm all the specs, which we have done, and we'll be going to procurement shortly. So they haven't been purchased yet, but we're about to enter the procurement stage of that process.
And just on that, the last slide you showed, and then you spoke about Sun Peaks, I think we owe you gratitude and thank you for being proactive and seeing the amount of cardboard and increase that's happening in that community because it's growing and being proactive and doing something. But as Vice Chair Grenier said, I think you look at every porch in there, in your neighborhood, and there's an Amazon box somewhere. And I think those units that we're sending up to Sun Peaks are probably going to be in every municipality, in every corner of every city. So, but thank you again for being proactive. And on that, any other questions on this? Oh, Director Smith, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question back on the farm plastics. What is the standard procedure happening today? Like, what do the farmers do with all of their stuff today?
Next question.
Or do we need to ask that?
Through the chair, some of it comes to landfill, some of it is managed on site, sometimes it's burned. Yeah, those are the ways that people are currently dealing with it.
Seeing no other questions, we will go to new business. Seeing none, and it is 3:30. This meeting is adjourned.